This episode is scripted by John Ruths and Newell Fisher and is narrated, recorded and edited by Newell Fisher. Hello and welcome to the Watership Down podcast episode 35, in which we will be going through chapter 35, Groping. First of all, though, I'm just going to go through some of the reviews of the podcast I've found. Unfortunately, I've had to go hunting for these as there are no automatic notifications from podcast providers. I'm so sorry if you've left one of these reviews and felt it was not acknowledged at the time. Having found these, I'll make sure I keep checking. I'm not including YouTube comments, wonderful though these are, as they are easy to find and get acknowledged on the channel. Check it out if you haven't already. The channel, strangely enough, is called the Watership Down Podcast. Most of the contents is just these audio episodes adapted for YouTube, which I'm putting up as and when I can. But there are 2 films as well at present. Check out my first site visit from Sandalford Warren to the River Enbourne if you haven't already. Anyway, on to the reviews. In July, I think, on Podbay, a listener called Carrie Loves Books said, quote, "Informative and interesting. Newell dives deep into Watership Down. Interesting facts and beautifully shared information. Love his podcast." End quote. Thank you for those very kind words, Carrie. Much appreciated. I think dives deep is a very good phrase for what I'm doing here. On Apple Podcast on 16th of October, Andrew from Manchester in the UK said, quote, "A first-class podcast, an absolute delight and a feeling of belonging to a community. Wonderful." End quote. This recent comment really pleased me. I've tried to engage with online Watership Down fan communities right from the start with this podcast, so it's excellent to see that there is some sense of community around the podcast itself. I'm interested in developing this further, so please let me know how you think I can do this. I have a lot of time constraints right now, but we'll have a bit more time once our emergency house move is over and would love to develop this element of the podcast further, especially as the listenership of this podcast has already provided me with a fellow scriptwriter, just as that was exactly what was needed, the very excellent and well-informed John Ruths. I could have let my ego kick in and decide to keep going as a one-man band, with the podcast having to move to fortnightly, that's 2 weekly to anyone outside the UK, but I'm so glad I didn't. If you have left a review that I've missed, please don't be shy, let me know by email at The Watership Down Podcast, that's all one word, all lowercase, The Watership Down Podcast at outlook.com. You could also leave a voice comment via my page on Anchor Podcasts. I would love to include other voices on the podcast, as mine on its own must get a bit tedious sometimes. To leave a message, go to anchor.fm, search for the podcast by name, and follow the message link at the bottom of the podcast details. I'd love to hear from you. Chapter 35, Groping. The pre-chapter quote is interesting and taken from a much longer Samuel Johnson quote that is really a prayer. In this case we see only, quote, "this world where much is to be done and little known," end quote. In this case, Dr. Johnson's quote harkens to Bigwig and what he's feeling about now. Another reason could be that later on Bigwig does hear from a supernatural voice that is either El-ahrairah or possibly Frith. The title of this chapter uses a word that refers to either trying to find something you cannot see or to sexual assault. In a way, that is appropriate, as the latter meaning pretty much sums up the pretext for Bigwig's meeting with Hyzenthlay, though I doubt Adams intended this meaning, though it does mean that the name of this chapter reads strangely to modern eyes. The former meaning works much better, as Bigwig starts to try to put his plan into action. He already has his strategy, now is the time for tactics. This chapter opens with Bigwig and some on-the-job training being administered by Chervil and Avens. It's easy to see right away that they definitely have some finite systems and practices in Efrafa. Even burying Hraka, something that we associate with cats, hence the miracle of the litter box, is mandatory. Richard Adams uses words like natural and antisocial to describe the dispirited rabbits of the near hind mark. Bigwig is learning his ways, but also picking up some critical intelligence. When he states, "Well, I admire your thoroughness," he's really thinking about how tough this mission is going to be. Hraka is typically buried by rabbits being punished. You can always find those, and this comment by Chervil gives you an idea of just what this place is like and why rank-and-file rabbits do not seem to be enjoying their lives very much. From Avens, He also hears an account from an Efrafan point of view of the escape of the group of hlessil, or wandering rabbits without a warren, from the right flank mark. We know these rabbits to have been Holly and his fellow emissaries. This is where we also learn of the death of Charlock on the Iron Road. Avens also lets Bigwig know that the General is likely to want to take him out on wide patrol in person before too long, and good luck to him. Bigwig is the toughest of all the watership-downed rabbits, and proves to be even tougher in the chapters ahead. However, at this moment he's quite lonely. He thinks of the honeycomb, holly and hazel much the same way that Bilbo Baggins thinks about his hobbit hole creature comforts while he's journeying with the dwarves. He soon encounters Blackavar for the first time, and we also see the word Owslafa for the first time, a word meaning an elite section of an Owsla as opposed to simply the captain or captains, a term we only encounter in Efrafa. Bigwig's logic tells him that this must be some scarred veteran which has earned him an escort. How wrong he is. The escort is simply because poor Blackavar is basically just a prisoner and no more. Chervil's comment about how Blackavar may soon meet a rabbit blacker than himself is even more disheartening than his earlier comment about punishment. Blackberry had advised Bigwig to be on the lookout for any signs of disaffection, and soon he encounters some of the insurgency or discontented does in this mark. Nellthilter is a young doe who is also a bit snark, and it seems like she enjoys living on the edge somewhat. Interestingly, she is referred to as being only 3 months old. She speaks to Chervil in a very snarky way. He does not mind, and to him it's just an indicator that the Owsla are in a dominant position. We learn that Owsla members can have does whenever they like. It seems that issues of consent do not matter when it comes to the Owsla. This is another aspect of human totalitarian societies that mainly impacts the female half of the population. Is it possible that nearly all the fathers in this warren are simply those in the upper tiers of this society, in other words, the council and Owsla? Bigwig decides that if he escapes, that Blackavar will come along. That proves to be a very smart impulse later on. While moving around and observing, he notices that among the group of does, one of them has the attention of the others, a critical observation. His internal monologue is fully explained to the reader, as at this point there is no one he can openly talk to. He overhears one of the does reciting a very depressing poem about never being able to go outside, choose a mate, or feel the wind blow again. This affects even the tough Bigwig, who can recognise real suffering. These does are at the end of their tether. Adams discusses Bigwig's character. His toughness, lack of sentimentality, and his being able to quickly size others up. He decides to engage the does in conversation. We meet Thethuthinnang, a wonderful Lapine does name meaning movement of leaves. In the chapter notes, Adams even tells us how to pronounce this name. More importantly, we are introduced to Hyzenthlay at last, the doe who explained Efrafa to Holly before he escaped. Bigwig only just restrains himself from commenting. She now seems utterly broken, unlike the impulsive Nellthilter. Bigwig does some more circulating, only to conclude how efficient this warren is. We learn from Marjoram what happened with Blackavar that got his ears all torn up as they are. Bigwig can see how he himself could get away, but is quite taken aback as to how he's supposed to get a bunch of does and Blackavar away. However, he also learns how little rabbits and Efrafa can know about what is going on in other parts of the warren. Marjoram doesn't even seem to realise that Bigwig is a newcomer. This could work to his advantage. He also learns from Captain Campion that the Efrafans indeed do not like to go beyond the Iron Road, and that he will be going on wide patrol as soon as his mark are off Dawn and Eveling's silflay. Bigwig feigns enthusiasm. Later, he ends up thinking in circles about how to achieve his mission and rescue Blackavar, and sleeps. Soon Bigwig thinks about sharing some information with Hyzenthlay. He has her summoned to his burrow on a pretext of wanting to mate with her. She's naturally hesitant to trust Bigwig, especially in this socially toxic environment. Bigwig waxes lyrical about all that has occurred up to now. He clearly feels confident that it's okay to share knowledge with Hyzenthlay, and it is, as we know. We soon learn that she has visions like Fivers. As she replies to Bigwig, she actually relates a vision of future events involving Nuthanger Farm, crazy events that make no sense right now, such as a rabbit riding in a hrududu or car. It is because of this ability that she knows to trust Bigwig. And in this world, in which psychic powers are definitely real, that is good enough. Bigwig, after his recent experiences, now knows he can trust her instincts, which makes any plan a lot safer. Soon we learn that the violent escape attempt that earned Blackavar his punishment ties right in with Hyzenthlay and their recent attempt to leave Efrafa. Hyzenthlay also makes a comment about the bureaucracy of the Warren, the same kind of bureaucracy that enabled Holly and the others to escape. The does who asked to leave Efrafa were split up between marks, but Hyzenthlay and Thethuthinnang, the two main ringleaders, were kept together, which made little sense, but in Efrafa that doesn't matter as long as the order was fulfilled. This reminds me of aspects of the Red Army during World War II, in which, for example, a unit was once commanded to cross a river despite there being no bridge. They drowned. But that didn't matter as long as the order was fulfilled. Bigwig and Hyzenthlay begin to plan their future escape. She makes it clear that Nell Filter was not part of the original group, and it would be risky to share too much information with her as she is too naive. But it is also important not to share the plan with any does who they decide to take out of Efrafa until a very short time before any escape. Thethuthinnang is the one exception to this. Such is the nature of this warren. Hyzenthlay and Thethuthinnang will select the does who will escape, while Bigwig will focus on the actual mechanics of that escape. This is very sensible delegation, and Hyzenthlay, surely the most prominent doe in the whole of Watership Down, has already more than proved her worth. Bigwig explains that the best time for the escape to happen would be at sunset, and that this should happen as soon as possible. He also tells Hyzenthlay about the Kihar. She critiques the plan after thinking about it by pointing out how relentless the pursuit will be, and that it will be led by the general himself. Bigwig reassures her that there is a plan for escaping the pursuit that it is difficult to explain, as she has not even heard of such a thing as a river. Their mark is due to lose evening silflay in a couple of days' time. This gives the plan far more urgency. Bigwig decides that they must therefore escape on the following evening, and that Blackavar will be coming with them. It's clear that Bigwig has serendipitously happened upon someone who he can work with. Hyzenthlay decides that she'll go along all the way. The idea of a free life appeals to her, and the risk is thoroughly worth it. Once Hyzenthlay departs, Bigwig manages to doze and has some menacing dreams before drifting off into a deep sleep. He also talks in his sleep, as we will see in the next chapter. Next time, the first of the 3 Thunder chapters, and the tension builds almost to breaking point.